Hello, Aaron Estrada here. In this video, we're going to explore the GridWarp node and its basic controls. So let's get started. I'm going to drop down a GridWarp node by hitting Tab and starting to type GridWarp, and there it is. And by default, it will connect to the source input of the GridWarp. That will be the default connection. You can also connect a destination image if you would like to do a morph. You'll notice that a set of controls, new controls, have popped up around the viewer. Let's go through these one by one. The first is a pull-down menu that switches which output the node sends out. So let's warp this just a little bit so we can see it. Right now it's selected to send the source warped out. The destination, if we had a destination, we could see the destination image unwarped. Destination warped, or morph. If we had a morph set up, we could morph between the two. Or we can just look at the source, unwarped. The next set of controls controls which grid you're looking at, either the source or the destination grid, or automatic. Automatic is a good mode to leave on. What it'll do is it'll switch these around to show the most appropriate view for what you are doing. But if you need to take control, you can turn that off and control which grid you want to look at. The next control is auto key. If this is clicked on, Nuke will automatically key the grid as you edit it. The next is a pull-down menu for ripple edit mode. So let's turn that on. You can control how much you would like to ripple edit. So if you turn on all, it will ripple edit all keyframes, forward and backward. Or you can go from start or to end from where you are, or choose a range of frames you would like to ripple edit when you edit a keyframe. It's possible to show the labels of each point in case you need to find them in the curve editor by name. So when I click on a jack, you'll see that it shows me the name of that point. You can also control if you'd like to show the transformation handles or not. The next button is pretty important. This is the persistent preview button, and it's an acceleration mode that Nuke uses. In more recent versions of Nuke, when you are warping live, you'll notice it's very fast, and the reason for that is that the live warp is actually a proxy or a preview warp that's done in OpenGL, and then it switches over to the software renderer after a moment when you let go of the jack. So if you turn this off, you're disabling that mode, and it could be a little slower. There we go. It's a little bit slower to update. So persistent preview is a good thing to leave on because it basically just forces it to leave the preview on until it's ready to switch over to the software rendered image. This next menu item or edit item will control the amount of subdivision in the grid. So let me undo that so you can see something. When you re-subdivide a grid that has already been edited, Nuke will ask you if you're sure you want to subdivide. And what it'll do is it'll make its best effort to subdivide with the edits sort of reflected in the new subdivision, the edits that you've already done. But there's no guarantee that they will be precise, so it asks you before you do that. There you go. So you can create a new fixed amount of subdivision before you even start. So let's reset this with a new GridWarp for the rest of the demo. The next set of items along the left of the frame here are the edit items, and you'll notice they're similar to the roto node, but they work a little differently. Instead of drawing shapes, the plus will simply add new subdivisions or new grid lines wherever you click, either horizontally or vertically. You can also delete lines. These buttons down here will allow you to add and remove points by selecting, or lines by selecting points and then adding in vertical or horizontal cuts. You can also add them to both simultaneously with this button. This item here will allow you to draw the boundary of the grid. And you can only have one grid up at a time, so this is usually what you'll use during your first setup, your initial setup. Before we move out of the viewer, there's one more thing I want to show you. It's possible to connect individual points to tracking points. So if you select a point and right-click it, you can use the link menu to link this to any tracker. I have no tracker set up in the scene, so there's nothing to link it to. But if you had a tracker, you could link this to a tracker. So let's move on to the properties. I'm going to create some keyframes here. Warp this a little bit. And you'll notice that the keys, because auto key is selected, it is creating keyframes in the destination grid, because that's what I'm editing. I've source warped, and auto has automatically selected the destination grid for me intelligently. But let's say that I wasn't really happy with this and I wanted to make this my new source to take this distortion out. I was using this to set this up, let's say. And I realized, oh, I accidentally edited this, and really I meant for this to be my source shape. Well, what you could do is you can select the keyframe and you can copy it using this button here, and you can paste it to the other grid. So in this case, we're editing the destination grid. I'm going to paste this to the source grid. So now on this keyframe, the shape, if we go and look at the source shape, we'll turn this off of auto and we'll look at the source shape. You can see the source shape has become the same as that destination shape that I'd created. I'm going to turn auto back on again. There we go. And then we'll sort of rock through here a little. You can see the animation is still there on the initial frame, but if I wanted to do the same for the initial frame, I could copy that keyframe and then paste it here for the destination or the source. So there we go. And this doesn't have keyframes on it, so you would have to make sure that you created keys for those as you pasted them. So I'll create a key, paste, do that for the here, copy, and paste, and then it shouldn't warp at all because both are the same. Moving down, you can see the settings. This is a duplicate of this menu here, so we can control what the node will output. In this case, we're only warping a still image, so we would use this source warped mode, but if we were going to do a morph or something else, we could select that here and send it out. Now, if you're doing a morph and you select morph here, these two additional controls will unghost. And this has to do with how much you're warping between the source and the destination. And then this is how much you're dissolving between the source. In this case, we're 100% in the source, and then the destination, which will mix in, if we had a destination attached, would mix in the destination image. So that's how you can do a morph. So that's the basics of this, of the GridWarp node. Now let's look at an example that's maybe a little bit less obvious way that you would use it if you had never seen this done before.